Hey you guys, it's Peter, and welcome to my channel, Peterisms, where I tell stories of my life and just little things I've learned as I've grown into the person that I am today. And today is another meditation day. I was looking through all of my meditation books that I have stored in my bathroom cabinet in there. I have like 2 rows of them. And I found the Journey to the Heart, Daily Meditations on the Path to Freeing Your Soul by Melody Beatty. And I actually haven't read this one in quite some time. And I was like, oh my God, I forgot I had this one. And there's like 5 or 6 in the back row that I had forgotten that I had. And you guys know I love Melody Beatty, and I went in here and I dog-eared a couple of my favorites because I went back through like the last 2 months and there were so many that were really good. So get ready because there's going to be a lot more from this one as well as the other Melody Beatty book, The Language of Letting Go, that I use on a regular basis on this channel. But I was kind of going through them and I was kind of like, okay, what's something that I talk about on this channel on a regular basis? What's something that I think would be, I don't know, helpful to somebody else as well as helpful to me? And so, since I talk on here a lot about like learning lessons in life and things, you know, have lessons behind them and things that happen to us are teaching moments, I found this one called Let the Lesson Reveal Itself to You, and it's from August 14th, and I thought this is a really, really powerful one. So I want to read it to you. And it starts like this. What's the next lesson? I asked. If you knew what it was, you wouldn't need to learn it, he said. Often in the midst of a lesson or experience, we tighten our minds into knots, trying to figure out what we're learning, what's coming next, what the lesson is really about. But if we knew what the lesson was about, we wouldn't need to be learning it. The learning we're doing on our spiritual path is often not possible from our heads or books. It's a process of discovery. It includes many twists, turns, surprises, and upsets, much confusion, wondering, and stumbling until we reach a moment of clarity. To learn the lesson, we need to go through the experience, and usually we learn best when we're a bit vulnerable and uncertain about what we're learning. Trust that the lesson will reveal itself to you when it's time. Stay present for this moment. Let your experiences and guidance unfold. You're evolving and learning and growing right now. When the transformation is complete, you'll see what you've learned. Other people may be there to help us, teach us, guide us along our path, but the lesson to be learned is always ours. And I think it's a really, really powerful meditation. You know, I've mentioned on here often that I really like the Maya Angelou quote that when you're going through the middle of the biggest tragedy in your life or something really horrible, look up and say thank you because you're about to learn a very valuable lesson. And when I look back on my life, you know, it's never the happy times that I've learned stuff from. It's never been the congratulatory pat on the back moments. It's always been the difficult times that I've learned from. And, you know, whether it's from getting sober to losing a parent to breakups that I've had in my life to whatever that I've gone through, you know, financial woes, things like that, I've always learned a lot from that. Actually, I think financial difficulties is a really valuable lesson, you know. There have been times in my life when I've had debt, and I've talked a lot about this on my vlog, and like working through that, what it's made me realize is what really is important and what's not important, you know, and as far as like, I've talked about this on here too, you know, my friend Tanya and I, we used to go, well, we still do, we go to like Walmart or Meijer late at night, right? And I would go in there like 2 or 3 nights a week, and I would go in there and say, I'm gonna buy deodorant, or I've gotta buy toothpaste or something, and I would end up coming out with like $60 or $100 worth of stuff. Things that I didn't need, but things I wanted at the time, you know, whether it was like a candle here, or maybe a movie or a book or whatever, but it would add up. And I wouldn't even think much about it, you know? And then I would get home and it would make me happy for a moment, but then I would, you know, put the book away on the bookshelf and put the candle, you know, out somewhere, and, you know, everything would kind of have its place, and then I had spent $60 to $100 2 to 3 times a week. And what I realized over time was I didn't like need those things necessarily, right? That I had a lot of what I needed. One of the prayers I used to say when I first got sober, a friend of mine taught me this prayer and I love it, is help me to want what I already have. And it's really a prayer of gratitude. Be careful when you say it because, you know, you have to make sure that what you have is really what you want, you know, and I think too, but I think really what it does is it makes you look at your present life, you know, and like I've talked on here a lot about, you know, practicing gratitude on a daily basis. It's something that I do every morning that I get up and every night before I go to bed now, you know, is that I go through my life and I look at all of the things that I'm really grateful for. And it's not like, you know, oh, I'm grateful for, you know, taking this amazing trip, which I am. It's not like, you know, oh, I'm grateful for this or I'm grateful for that, like, you know, financial benefit in my life. It's things like, like, thank you for my health today, you know? Thank you for having food and water to eat and drink, and thank you for my husband and my dog's health today, and my family and my friends and my marriage and things like that. And then what happens is, once you pull back and you go through tough times, like when I was talking about the financial woes, it puts everything else in perspective. And, you know, one of the things that my friend Tanya, because she can still spend $60 or $100, she'd probably tell you she needs everything. But, you know, she noticed over time, she was like, you're not buying things when we go out. You're like going in and buying like one thing. And I'm like, yeah, and I can walk around the store with her for an hour and not buy anything. And that was kind of something that changed over time, because what I started doing was, when I would go into a store, I would pick up something and I would ask myself, is this something that I want, or is this something that I need? Now, there are times that I go shopping and I just kind of buy stuff that I want. I think we all do that, right? But by and large now, if I go places on a regular basis, I don't just go in there and buy 5 things that I don't want. And, you know, my basement is, you know, jam-packed with stuff that I don't want anymore and I never really needed to begin with. And so when you go in and you start asking yourself that on a financial level, like what do I want and what do I need? It puts everything else in perspective, I think, you know? And the same is true for whatever lesson we learn in life. You know, like when my mom passed away, when you have a parent or a family member or a friend, anybody out there that's gone through this, you'll totally relate and nod your head at this moment. But when you're going through something like that in your life, everything else pales in comparison to it. You know, it's like, okay, so-and-so's upset with you and you fought with this person. It doesn't really matter. Okay. You know, or like, hey, what about this? I'm stressed out and I'm troubled about that. Okay, I'm losing a parent, you know? It puts everything in perspective for you. And I think that when we go through those tragic moments, that is what looking up and saying thank you is all about, because there is a very valuable lesson to be learned, you know? Whether that's even just like going through something and saying, okay, what's my part in that, you know? What is my part in the ending of this relationship? Or what is my part, you know, in that this happened or whatever? And what can I do to correct that for the future? And that's how I choose to live my life, because patterns are going to repeat themselves in my life if I don't correct things. And sometimes that's hard, you know? And I love the part in here where it says, you know, the learning we're doing on our spiritual path is often not possible from heads or books. It's a process of discovery. It includes many twists, turns, surprises, and upsets, much confusion, wondering, and stumbling until we reach a moment of clarity. To learn the lesson, we need to go through the experience. And usually we learn best when we're a bit vulnerable and uncertain about what we're learning. And I think that's powerful, because I don't think, you know, like unless I go through the lesson, you know, that I ever learn anything from it. And I've talked about this on here as well as on my vlog, but with my mother's passing, you know, people would say to me, it's time to move on, it's time to move on, you know? And I had talked to a friend of mine who lost her son that I knew, and I said, everybody's telling me to move on. You know, I don't know, like, when the time was right or whatever. And she said, no, she said, we don't ever move on, we move through. And we carry the experience of those people in our lives with us, and they'll be with us forever. Well, I think that's for any experience, not just people in our lives, you know? I think when you go through something that's really hard for you or challenging, you go through the experience. And if you allow yourself to really go through and feel it, to not just sit there and refuse to feel it, but to really go through the experience and allow yourself to emotionally respond to it, which is how I try to live my life today, then what happens after that is that you've learned valuable lessons along the way. You've learned really some things that were hard, some things that were hard, some things that were painful, some things that were tough, right? And it's not always like the lesson, you know, right at the beginning. Like, I think, like, for example, when you go through a breakup, I think often our response is, I'm never going to date again. Like, that's the lesson, right? Or men, you know, are never reliable, or women this, or whatever. You know, I think, like, you know, that's kind of our initial response to things is, you know, that it's the relationship that it's a problem, or it was this person, or it was just people in general, when that's not really the lesson to be learned in going through a breakup. You know, the lesson is maybe, well, what can I do next time to be a better partner? Or, you know, because you can't fix the other person anyway. You know, it's like, well, what can I do next time to be a better partner? What can I do next time to be a better coworker or employee or friend or whatever, you know? And then you have to take a look at all those things and hopefully grow as a person. And I think, like, that's where going through tough experiences are good for us, you know? And it's not, I mean, listen, we all go through relationships, and I'm not talking about abusive, horrible relationships. I'm not talking about that at all, okay? I'm talking about just breakups that we don't know really what happened to it. The other thing I think in learning, like in going through relationship breakups that we can learn is that there are good people out there. You know, I was talking about this on my vlog last night, that I think a lot of times, you know, people will get out of a relationship and say, I'm never going to date again. Like, there's nobody good out there. When that's not the case at all, you know? And, you know, I said this on my blog. I would have rather have loved and lost than never have loved at all. And that applies to everything in my life that I've tried and not been super successful at, you know? And, because I think you don't really know unless you've tried it, and you don't really know what you're going to learn unless you go through tough times and you allow yourself to really be vulnerable and feel the emotions and feel what you're going through. And you know, when we talk about grief, that's part of grief, is really allowing ourselves to feel the emotions that we're afraid of feeling. And I know for me, like, I just felt numb for a long time, and I think, you know, with my mom's passing, and I think that that was partly me refusing to allow myself to feel the feelings. When I did, it was like this watershed moment, and I just started bawling all the time and whatever, and you know, like, and it was like this, and then I kind of got to the other side, and it's like, okay, now I can respect her passing, and you know, that she was part of my life, and I've, you know, learned some very valuable lessons from that. I've learned that I'm strong, you know, I've learned that loss is going to happen in life, and I've learned that, you know, death is the great equalizer. It is, you know, we're all going to pass away one day. We're all going to have people in our lives that are going to pass away. It also made me, I think, appreciate more the fragility of life and relationships in my personal life. And so those were lessons that I learned, you know, and it, you know, I also learned, you know, that small things are important to people, you know, and like one of the things my mom said to me on her last birthday was, I can't believe in 64 years I've gotten a birthday cake every year until this year. And I said to her, next year, Mom, I promised next year, because I had forgotten, you know, and there was no next year. And so now I try to remember those things for people, because those are really the small things that really matter in life, and I think make somebody's life mean more, you know, when we remember those things. So it's really about allowing ourselves to go through the experience, feel the experience, and learn something from it. And so I think it's a really valuable meditation to remember that, you know, that the lesson is not always when we want it or where we want it. Like the lesson, you know, it's like the old Buddha saying that, you know, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Sometimes we're not ready. Sometimes the lesson is a year or 2, 3 down the road. You know, I can sometimes be sitting in a meeting and somebody will be talking about something that's very similar to something I went through, and the thing may have happened to me 15 years ago, and I'm like, all of a sudden it's like light bulb moment. I'm like, oh wow, that was the lesson, and I never even realized it till now. And I think that's kind of how lessons unfold in life, you know? So anyway, let me know what you think in the comment section below. I hope you guys are having a wonderful weekend. I love you, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.